Hello, IB Bio students. Today we continue with the placenta. So I just wanted to quickly review what we learned in the last video regarding human chorionic gonadotropin, or the HCG hormone. So remember that once the embryo has been implanted within the walls of the endometrium, the embryo starts to release HCG. And this is what's going to maintain the corpus luteum, which is the remains of the follicle. So the corpus luteum is not going to deteriorate and is going to release progesterone, which is going to thicken the cervix and is going to maintain the endometrial wall so that the embryo doesn't shed. So the corpus luteum here has an important role, but it's not going to remain forever. The corpus luteum remains around the first trimester, 8 to 10 weeks, while the placenta is being developed. So what is the placenta? The placenta facilitates the exchange of materials between the mother and the fetus. And the placenta has a very important hormonal role as well in keeping levels of estrogen and progesterone high. So if we look at the placenta, we see it as a life support system in the fetus, right? It's going to facilitate the exchange of materials and is also going to secrete hormones to maintain the pregnancy after the corpus luteum has degenerated. So here's the structure of the placenta. So if we look at this, we see the maternal arteries and the maternal veins here, which of course is what connects to the mother. And then we see these arteries and veins kind of pool into this area here. And form these capillaries here into this area called the intervillous space, or the lacuna. And here, these little villi that surround this area is called the chorionic villus. So you have these little pools of blood here, and notice how the fetal vein and the fetal artery, they're also going to connect to the placenta, and they are going to extend their arms into the lacunas as well. So the exchange is going to happen right here within the chorionic villus. So what gets exchanged? So if we look at this picture here, we see that the fetus is going to give to the mother the wastes that the fetus releases, the carbon dioxide from cellular respiration, the urea from the nitrogenous wastes that are toxic, but then also hormones. Remember that one of the hormones that the embryo starts to give the mother is HCG, and then the developing fetus also does that. And then when it's time for the birthing process, there are hormones that the fetus is also going to release. And then the mother is going to provide and exchange nutrients, oxygen, antibodies, vitamins, and water. And pretty much everything that the mother puts into her body, the fetus is going to absorb. So what is the hormonal role of the placenta? So we see that a pregnancy is divided into 3 trimesters. So the first 3 months of pregnancy, they're called the first trimester. So notice that at this point you have high levels of HCG because the placenta has not fully formed. So the placenta is going to take over the role of the ovary, the role of the corpus luteum around the second trimester. So if we focus here on the first trimester, notice that the hormonal role here is pretty much all left to the ovary. It's left to the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is in charge of releasing progesterone to maintain the endometrium and to release levels of estrogen also for proper not only fetal development, but the characteristics that come with being pregnant, right? So eventually production of mammary glands. Not mammary glands, but milk in the mammary glands, sorry. So here you see the fetus releasing high levels of HCG, right, to target the ovary, to target the corpus luteum, and to target the release of progesterone and estrogen. We see in the second trimester that the ovary role has been diminished somehow because the placenta is now formed right here on the exterior. And you see now that the fetus is releasing less amount of HCG, which means that that's not going to target the corpus luteum anymore. So then that means that the role of the corpus luteum starts to slowly diminish as the corpus luteum disintegrates and withers away. So notice that the role of the ovary here is diminished with low amounts of progesterone and estrogen being produced. Now here the placenta has a very important role now because it is up to the placenta to release the high levels of progesterone and the high levels of estrogen. Now, in the third trimester, notice how the ovary has pretty much relinquished all role here, and the fetus is releasing very low amounts of HCG, and it's the placenta who is releasing now really high amounts of progesterone and high amounts of estrogen for milk production in the mammary glands and progesterone to maintain that endometrium. So here we see the fetus. And we see the fetus is surrounded by an amniotic sac, and inside the amniotic sac is the amniotic fluid. And notice how the amniotic sac surrounds the uterus. And then here off to the side is the disc-shaped placenta that is going to connect the mother to the fetus. Here we see the cervix of the female. So we see the baby's head pushing onto the cervix of the mother. So here, going back to the placenta, we see here the umbilical cord. That's where the fetal vein and the fetal arteries are. And remember that the umbilical cord is what's going to connect to that fetus. Okay. So there it is. That is the role and the structure of the placenta. It's very important. So in the next video lesson, we're going to learn about the birthing process and what happens to the placenta during the birthing process.